Welcome to another episode of Purpose is Trade. My name is Parvez Khan, and we'll be talking about global economics, episode 4, and we'll get right into it. So, last episode, I believe we talked about the shift from these Western fiat currencies to BRICS currency to crypto adoption. And on this episode, I want to focus on one particular fiat currency that's going through a tough time, that's been going through a tough time recently, and that is the Canadian dollar, the loonie. And I've lived in Canada, I've studied in Canada, I've worked there, and I have a good understanding of, I think I have a good understanding. I'll give my opinion. If anyone disagrees, you can share your opinion in the comments. But I'll basically explain what I think is going on. The recent decline of the loonie the last few weeks against the US dollar. That's in part as a result of Trump announcing he's going to tariff 25% Canadian exports to US. And basically, that's going to. So here for those who don't understand Canada, here's the Canada's main export is its natural resource. Yes, they make a bit of money by uh, providing decent education, higher level university education to immigrants and foreigners. But their main export, the main source of money of income for Canada as a whole is their natural resources. They have a bit of automobile industry, which is in the decline in the Eastern Canada, in Ontario and all that. But the main export is natural resources, oil, gas, mainly from Western Canada, Alberta, where I lived. And they mainly exported through a bunch of pipelines running from Alberta down south to US. So when Trump is announcing this 25% tariff, he's not, I don't believe he will tariff the oil because this oil is bought up by US refineries, and then the refined products is sold at a premium to customers in Europe. So the spread will decrease. I think he's talking about tariffing the automobiles that come from Ontario. And the fundamental reasoning, the logic behind the strategy behind that is Trump wants to bring that automobile industry from Ontario into America, build your automobiles in America. Don't build a bunch of them in, don't build parts in Canada and then move back to US and all that. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want China to take advantage of the NAFTA deals and all that in Canada and Mexico. So that's why he's trying to force those automobile companies to not build their EVs and the conventional vehicles, automobiles in Ontario and Eastern Canada. They want to bring that industry in down south. And I think that's where the tariff mentality is coming in. So in that scenario, that will take a big chunk out of Canadian export, right? Then Canada is basically, uh, I mean, not much different to Russia in terms of its uh, export economy, its economic distribution. It's not much different to Russia because it's basically at that point it's just going to be a petrol pump, dressed up as a country. Yeah, because if you ruin the whatever automobile industry is left in Eastern Canada by tariffing them, then basically you just have these natural resources that USA will want to buy cheaply, refine them, and then sell them at a premium in the world market. Because USA has access to the world markets, Canada does not, as well as USA does, at least. Canada does not have global access as well as USA does. So yeah, it's a win for USA. It's a loss for Canada. And But I think something bigger is at play here. And there was a recent report. So, let's get back to our fundamental question, which is why is the Canadian dollar crashing in the last few weeks, especially the last few days? Why is the loonie falling so badly against the dollar? And I mean, yes, the Trump announcement of the tariff was one thing, but there was also an announcement by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that he wants to basically increase his deficit spending by giving tax breaks, GST tax breaks during this Christmas holiday. Maybe he's trying to buy some votes before the election next year, who knows, maybe. But I think this is where we get into if you want to understand how weak the Canadian economy is, this will just give you a good idea. Canada was one of the first major G7 countries to start to lower their interest rate this year. And they've lowered their interest rate at a faster pace than USA simply because their economy is too weak. So when they raised the interest rate last year, the economy basically went into a mild recession, but unemployment picked up very fast. And that just showed how weak the economy is. And so if you think about Canada's economy, it has a bit of AI, a bit of the clean energy industry because of all the regulations, government enforce and all that. So the energy industry is there, the renewable industry is there, very small, not like USA. They have some AI. I think they have the most number of AI engineers or something, but now USA is bringing them into US and offering them good salaries. So the Canadian AI, artificial intelligence engineers are moving to US for a better life. I don't blame them. And then what else they got? They had good universities, but then they got greedy. They brought in too many foreign students, and the quality of education at these universities is on the decline. It has been for the many years. And what else? They have a service industry, which is obviously nowhere as strong as US because Canadians don't spend as much money on discretionary spending, like going out to the pub and the club, not like Americans do. So, and also because Canadian households have a record level of debt. So I heard Canadian households now hold the most debt in the history of Canada. Their households now hold the most debt than they ever did in the past. And I think this brings us back to a fundamental issue with Canada, which is when your country has too much, when your country's export relies too much on the natural resources and there's too much regulation to create startups, to do some innovation, and you basically all the capital flow that comes into a country either goes into the natural resource development, which also has been stifled by all these carbon regulations that came in recently under Liberal government. But all basically all the when you're when there's not that environment to create new companies, to create startups because of such a rigid regulatory environment like Canada is, what ends up happening is whatever capital that flows into your country goes into either real estate, bonds, or natural resource development. And because natural resource industry has been hammered with all the carbon pricing regulations and all that, emission regulations in the last few years. And so basically, all the capital has been flowing into buying government bonds and buying assets. So Canada, it's a very common thing, whether you're an immigrant or a local Canadian, you get a job, you're pushing 30, you try to get a stable job, get a good mortgage, and people usually very most of the people who I mean if you're smart you'll get a fixed rate mortgage, but a lot of people go for variable rate mortgage. And I don't blame them when they did that deal 5, 10 years ago, where interest rates were very low. Going for a fixed rate at a high rate made no sense. So I don't blame them if they're getting hit right now. It's not easy to see coming. But I think when you have significant capital flowing into debt holding, whether it's government bond or mortgage securities, right? Or capital flowing into assets buying, right? And in that kind of economy, there's not much incentive to create startups, to create new companies. And so you are left with a very weak economy, which is very sensitive to interest rate. And when the Canadian households, because they hold a record level of debt, they're even more sensitive to any interest rate change by the Central Bank of Canada. And I think that's what you're seeing. So Canadian government has been now aggressively dropping rates, and that's been happening in the last few months. I think they'll have to drop even further because Canadian economy is actually much weaker than most people think. And with Trump back in the office, more jobs will move south of the border. And so I think Canadian government, Bank of Canada, will have to drop rates even further. And yeah, so I think that's coming. And I think that's why the loonie has been depreciating that this badly against the dollar, because people are expecting more job losses south of the border. They're expecting more mortgage defaults because of high interest rate. People who were on variable interest rate, they're now paying a lot of mortgage payments, higher mortgage payments. And so a lot of more defaults are coming in the Canadian real estate economy. And so people are expecting that, job loss, more mortgage defaults. And also Canada is basically not going to grow its population in the next 2 years or something. They've made a decision on that. I think that's a political gimmick. I think the population will grow regardless of what Trudeau says. But given all these factors, it's highly unlikely the Canadian economy is going to grow significantly against its US counterpart. And I think that's what you're seeing being reflected in the US CAD forex exchange. And yeah, so